One of the most important aspects for most characters in Genshin are their elemental bursts. For some characters, a majority of their damage is locked behind this ability, whereas for others, a significant amount of utility is gained from using their burst. In this video, I'll be going over every detail of the energy system needed to utilize these elemental bursts, from what types of energy there are, to how you can determine how much energy is right for you. With that, let's get started. There are two main types of energy, being particle and flat/direct. Particle energy comes in two different forms, being, well, particles and orbs. These can also be either elemental or rainbow/clear/white. I know, there are a lot of terms people use for the non-elemental modifier. The amount of energy these each give to a character depends on that character's element and their energy recharge. For particles, if your on-field character receives a particle of the same element, they gain 3 energy at 100% energy recharge. If the particle is of a different element, the character only gains 1 energy. For a rainbow particle, the character receives 2 energy. These numbers assume your character has 100% energy recharge and the character receiving the energy is on field. For orbs, the numbers are fairly similar. At 100% energy recharge and assuming the character is on field, you get 9 energy if the orb is of the same element as the character receiving it, 3 energy if it isn't, and 6 energy if the orb has no elemental association. Overall, it's fairly intuitive and shows how important it is for a character to receive the energy of the same element to get their elemental burst up faster. The other type of energy, flat/direct energy, is a bit less intuitive. There are two main differences between flat and particle energy. The first being that flat energy won't produce any particle effects. The energy instead just goes straight to your elemental burst meter. The second is that the amount of flat energy you get can't be modified by your energy recharge whatsoever. Hence the term flat energy. Generally, you gain energy from the following sources: elemental skills, weapon passives, character passives/constellations, normal/charged attacks, and getting enemies to certain HP thresholds. Let's go through these one by one. Elemental skills generate particle energy after hitting enemies, and these particles will always be the same element as the character that used the skill. The amount of energy these skills can generate can be RNG for some characters. I've linked the relevant Genshin wiki page in the description below so that you can take a look. Keep in mind that this page doesn't account for certain constellations like Official C6 and do not account for total energy generation over a total rotation, but these are detailed further in the wiki page for the specific character. Moving on, weapon passives like the entire Favonius archetype can also generate energy. It's worth noting that Favonius weapons are the most useful out of the bunch for 2 reasons. First, it's relatively easy to get enough Fav weapons over the course of playing the game to get them fully refined, making it much easier to get the energy generation. And secondly, these weapons are one of the few that generate particle energy instead of flat energy, making it so that the amount of energy given can be modified by the energy recharge stat. For character passives and constellations, generally these will give you flat energy more often than not. The only cases in which particles will be generated are either when the constellation alters the effect of the skill, like in the case of Official C6, or when the constellation explicitly states particles will be generated, like in the case of Keqing's C2. The energy generation normal and charge attacks give is a bit interesting. You start from a base probability of getting 1 flat energy. For every hit that doesn't generate energy, this probability increases until you get that energy, resetting back down to the base percentage. The chances you get energy are shown on screen, per weapon type. It's a bit interesting that sword users get a higher base probability than every other weapon type, but I digress. Also, as a quick note, plunge attacks don't have this chance to generate energy, so keep that in mind. Finally, for enemies, they generate energy particles once you reduce their health to a certain percentage of their max HP. Common thresholds include 66%, 50%, and 33%, but these vary across enemies. The same page that has the energy generation per character skill also includes this information. Outside of energy sources, it's important to note that off-field characters do not receive the same amount of energy on-field characters do for particle energy. The off-field tax amount depends on the number of characters you have in your party. For 2-member parties, the off-field character receives 80% of the total particle energy. For 3 members, it's 70%, and for 4 members, it's 60%. A more detailed example using this information will be located in the full theoretical calc example section of the video. Another common term you'll hear some theory crafters use is battery or battery character. These are characters that have high energy generation from their elemental skill. An example of this would be Bennett, who is a pyro battery. Battery characters are traditionally paired with characters that have high energy cost of the same element. Classic examples of this include Bennett and Shenling, and Beidou and Fischl. The idea is that you want to funnel the particles produced from your battery character into the other respective character to avoid the off-field energy tax. For example, after using Bennett's skill, I swapped directly into Shenling, giving her 6/9 energy at 100% energy recharge depending on RNG. It's good to keep these kinds of pairings in mind when building team comps, since it makes energy requirements less harsh. Now that you know way more about Genshin's energy system than you ever wanted to know, the biggest question you probably have is how much energy do you need to make your team work? There are a couple ways to determine this, and I personally do a combination of the two methods I am about to mention. The first method is to use a spreadsheet. Look, it isn't that serious, it's just multiplication, you'll survive. The idea is that you'll have a basic idea of who is collecting particles and whether they're off-field or not during this process. After going through a full rotation, you'll then see what the ER requirements are to get full burst uptime. I use a few assumptions here during these calcs, like assuming the lower end of particle generation for a character's skill if they have one and not getting particles for enemies. This makes it so that you can see if you theoretically have enough energy recharge to get full burst uptime, assuming consistent play. The second method is more practical. You can test your team directly on, say, something like Masanori. If you find that your rotation deals too much damage for you to accurately test, you can also just go into the abyss and test it there as well. If you find yourself having too little or too much energy, you can adjust accordingly. Just make sure to recognize what enemies you are fighting and if they give a lot of energy after reaching certain HP thresholds, as this can significantly affect how much energy recharge you think you need. As I mentioned earlier, I do a combination of the two, first using a spreadsheet to get a general idea of what kind of energy recharge I need, and then playing the comp in Abyss to further refine the overall playstyle and the energy recharge amount. As an example, take this particular Xingyan team. Xingyan and Rosaria both have 60 energy cost, Lisa and Yanfei both have 80 energy cost. My standard rotation is going from Lisa burst into her skill, then Rosaria's skill into her burst, Yanfei's skill with optional burst in this particular case, and then Xingyan's skill into her burst, afterward doing charge attacks and then starting over the entire rotation. In most of these cases, the character using the skill gets their respective particles, which is fairly standard for most rotations. On top of this, both Lisa and Rosaria get FAV procs as well. So, starting at the beginning, Lisa is the on-field character when gathering particles from her skill, so she is exempt from off-field taxation. Everyone else will only receive a 60% cut. Lisa will produce 5 electro particles and 3 white particles, along with also regenerating 2 flat energy for herself thanks to her C1. This means that she gains 23 total energy, 2 of which can't be affected by energy recharge, so we put it in a separate column. Accounting for the fact the rest of my party is of a different element and that they are off-field, we know that they will only receive 6.6 energy. For Rosaria's skill proc, she will produce 3 cryo particles and 3 white particles, along with her regenerating 5 energy from a crit with her skill thanks to her C4. So she gains a total of 20 energy, 5 of which is flat. Once again, since every member of the team is of a different element and off-field, we have to apply the energy tax and different elemental multipliers, which means everyone else only receives 5.4 energy. And we do this for the rest of the rotation, and get an overall estimate for how much energy recharge each character needs to ult properly, which is extremely nice. Keep in mind though, while something may work well theoretically, it doesn't matter if you aren't able to do it in game. In my opinion, theoretical calc should only give you an indication of how much you can get away with in terms of energy recharge and not the end-all be-all. My Xingyan actually has lower energy recharge than necessary to ult every rotation, but I optimized it for the Consecrated Beast that drops pyro particles, which is why I could get away with it. While you play, you'll find a way to improve your rotation and make it fit your playstyle, making it the most efficient for you. At the end of the day, that's what matters the most. I hope you learned something from this video regarding the energy recharge system Genshin has. I would like to quickly acknowledge KQM, Genshin Fandom Wiki, Binge, and Saluna for helping with the things presented in this video. They greatly helped for verification purposes and proofreading. You can view their channels down below. If you have any questions regarding what I've said in this video or any other questions that you might have about Genshin's combat system, please let me know. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.